But the story of the day in the NFL is Lamar Jackson met with the media in regards to signing his new contract. Here's Lamar on getting a deal done without an agent.
I didn't really do this to prove anyone wrong or really care about what anyone had to say. You know, it was anything I had to prove myself right. You know, like I know what I'm doing, and I felt I did the right thing.
Okay, so let's just take him at his word. He felt like he knew what he's doing, and he did the right thing. Okay, so I think he obviously got a great deal. I mean, regardless of where you fall on the money or whatever, he's making $80 million this year. He'll have $80 million in escrow. I think over the next 3 months, he gets put into an escrow account and he gets paid out periodically over the next year. So, I mean, whatever we want to think of anything, it's a 3-year guarantee with a little bit in afterwards. So technically it looks like a snapshot of many of these other deals. And those other deals I'm talking about are Josh Allen. Those other deals I'm talking about Kyler Murray. Those other deals, go through the other young quarterbacks. And it's not the Deshaun Watson deal. It may look like it because at the end of it, it says $260 million. But what it feels like is first 3 years, a lot of money. And then let's see where we're at. And if Lamar continues if he improves as a passer and stays healthy, then I would guess they tear up the deal and redo it before the last 2 years become live. And then he gets even more money, likely up front. And we do this whole thing again. That's what it looks like to me, to the layman, on paper as I've read. This was a weird thing, though. He had this exchange with a reporter when he was asked about his trade demand of a month ago.
In March, you tweeted out that you wanted a trade. A month later, you signed a record deal. What changed over that time?
Mr. Jameson, you know what? Today, we're going to keep it about the future. I'm not really worried about what happened in the past. We're going to keep it about these next 5 years and keep it about, what's going on today. It's a great day. Great day just signed with the guys up here. That's all I'm focused on right now.
I don't really I don't understand that. I want to prove myself right. I want to know I know what I'm doing. I want to take full ownership of the process, right? That's what I took from Lamar and his kind of opening salvo and statement. But then when asked about, hey, dude, so, okay, what happened? How'd you go from I want to be traded to, why can't you follow that up with well, here's what happened. I was disappointed. I don't need any, I don't need any details. I don't need any bitterness. It doesn't have to be a negative. It can simply be, look, we got to an impasse and I simply said, I want to be traded, and their deal, the deal changed, and I acquiesced. They acquiesced. We met in the middle. That's what happens in negotiation. I'm a little disappointed there. He went Mark McGuire on us. And it's one of those things, it won't affect him financially. He's set. He's good. That's generational wealth, right? You make somewhere between $150, $185 million over the next 3.5 years. You're good, right? And that's not the only money that he'll make. He makes money in endorsements as well. And it's not going to be his last contract in the NFL. But in self-empowerment, I did this, well, help us out on the process. How did it look so weird? How did it look so bad? His response to why he wanted to do this process alone struck me as very mature. His description or lack thereof of how did we get from I want to be traded to being at this point struck me as really defensive and immature. Nonetheless, Ravens got their quarterback. Here's Eric DeCosta on their negotiations.
I speak to Lamar. Lamar speaks. In the end, it was really two people. And I was dealing with Lamar Jackson, the agent, very impressive, patient, demanding, honest, straightforward. It wasn't always easy. I'd rather deal with Lamar Jackson, the player, I think. But in the end, it was just Lamar and I talking, texting, emailing each other, trying to get a deal done. There were really no other factors involved. I speak to Lamar. Lamar speaks to me. There's no collusion when it's me and Lamar speaking together. I think the conversations were great. I always understood where he was coming from, and I always think he understood where I was coming from. We always didn't agree necessarily, or we would have got a deal done a lot sooner. But the respect has always been there.
I think DaCosta comes out looking really, really good here. And you have to factor in that Eric DaCosta is replacing, in any conversation, the most respected GM in the history of the sport. Like Ozzie Newsome, if you say Ozzie Newsome's name in NFL circles, they're like, well, do you guys remember the E.F. Hutton commercials? You got to be of like our age. Like I'm sure we all remember, right? Byers a little bit younger than the rest of us. But we all remember they used to have this. E.F. Hutton was a financial investment firm, and they had a commercial series, which is great, which is when E.F. Hutton speaks, people listen, right? Ozzie Newsome is that guy. So Eric DaCosta is replacing like kind of the GOAT, Ozzie Newsome. Great player, Hall of Fame player, and same level of general manager. And so you don't want to be the guy that loses Lamar Jackson. And so to take ownership of it, to at the last second get this deal done. And oh yeah, by the way, the idea that, hey, it was just me and him, two men, and we met in the middle. And his breakdown of what took place was a lot better, a lot more telling. I think DaCosta wins. This is one of those, it really is a win-win. Especially a win for DaCosta, for the Ravens, and for teams as they continue. And I don't think it's not a collusion thing. It's just dumb to give a quarterback 5 years guaranteed, especially considering it's not just injury. Players' performance, not all, but many players' performance drop off dramatically in 3-4 years. That's the nature of this sport. It is, there's like 10 dudes on earth that can really play quarterback. Maybe 15. Okay? And it won't be the same 10 or 15 in 3 years. That's just the nature of it. You know what's fascinating is, damn, that division's good again. I mean, the one team you don't really know quarterback-wise is Pittsburgh. Like, say what you want about the Deshaun. I don't like the contract, and that franchise it feels like it's always going to be a bit of a mess. But Deshaun Watson can play. Okay? We know Deshaun Watson can play. We know Lamar can play, if healthy. Okay? But both of them, because of their style of play, maybe more so Lamar, although Deshaun's been hurt more, but both of them can really play. And, of course, we know that Cincinnati's got a quarterback, and he's going to get a new deal. He can play. Pittsburgh's an interesting one. And yet, they never had a losing season with Mike Tomlin. Andrew Brandt joins us. He's a former Packers executive. He has signed these contracts. Like, he's really the guy. Like, what do you get to who knows contracts and how they're written? And he hosts the Business and Sports podcast. He writes a column for Sports Illustrated. He has his Sunday 6 newsletter. He's got a little bit of everything. Andrew, I was just texting with an NFL GM during the break. That's not a humble brag. I'm just trying to, and I said, well, what do you think about the Lamar Jackson contract? He said, contract's not in yet. But I did see that you tweeted, hey, was the first 3 years of real money. Explain how, again, we don't know for a fact, but what you're told of this contract and what it looks like.
Yeah, I've heard from an executive as well. There's my name drop. But I've seen it with Pro Football Talk and I think one other place. The payout seems to be pretty strong in the early years of the contract. In other words, one of the markers that I look at as a former executive and a former agent is what's the 3-year cash. Because people talk about these things that don't matter. Cap, that doesn't matter. Total value of the deal, that doesn't matter. Because it's funny money in the latter years. It doesn't matter. What's 3-year cash? I mean, that's going to be real earnings. And again, cash is more important than cap. Who cares about cap? So it looks like $156 million. And Doug, that is strong. I mean, that is really strong. We can talk about the fact he didn't get the Watson guarantees. I get it. He was never going to get that, it seems like, in retrospect. But I also, as you saw my tweet, it's more than Aaron Rodgers. It's heads and tails more than people like Josh Allen, people like Patrick Mahomes, people like Jalen Hurts a week ago. I mean, this is a strong deal. And everyone has been sort of subtly or not so subtly blaming Lamar Jackson for not hiring a professional agent. But I'm a professional at this. My job is to analyze this stuff. And if that's true, that 156 number, strong work by Jackson.
Yeah. How likely is it to be true?
Well, Florio, Pro Football Talk tends to be pretty on the numbers because they are talking to people who see the deal. He actually says, from a source who saw the deal. I heard from someone that it is above 150. So that's what we're dealing with. And it's been out a few places that first-year cash is
80.
72. Yeah, 72 bonus and a 7.5 or $8 million salary. That's 80. I mean, again, I don't know who's beating that.
Okay, so can I tell you how it reads to me? Kind of the contract layman, but the football follower. Right here's how it reads to me. It reads to me that he gets all that money, a bunch of money up front, which will probably be surpassed with the Herbert deal and the Herbert and who else am I thinking of? A Joe Burrow deal, right?
Burrow.
Right, those will probably be surpassed. And then at the end of 3 years, probably gets it reworked anyway. And the last 3 years, they're not throwaway 2 years. He did get the no tag clause at the end of 5, which is in his favor.
Yeah.
But technically, they could get out of it after 3 years if they wanted to.
Yeah, I mean, this is the trade-off, right? He pushed and pushed and pushed, and I don't know this. I wasn't in there, but it seems like from all the reporting, he pushed and pushed and pushed to be the guy that would follow Watson's structure. And we can debate about this for hours, but the owners, whether collusion or not collusion, have beaten that back. They've browbeaten agents and Jackson back from the Watson precedent. And in 10 years, as I said to you, Doug, we're going to look back and say, hey, remember that Watson deal in 2022? The only guaranteed deal ever? But be that as it may, Watson won the other stuff, which is early cash flow, and frankly, length. Hurts is 6 years, and those ridiculous lengths on Allen and Mahomes, 10, 9, 12 years, 5 years. Now, people talk about Lamar's injury risk, but 5 years, he'll get another bite at the apple. I mean, he will at age 31 or 30, whatever it is. So I think he wins on the length, too. I think the Ravens wanted 6, 7 years like the other deals.
Okay, so what does Burrow, what does Herbert look like if you're negotiating?
Well, if I'm negotiating for the team, they're going to be less, and this is what I call the platform year, because Lamar's platform was the tag, right? If he didn't do this deal, he's getting $32 million. Okay, so let's do a cash 101 lecture to people. If you don't do the deal, you're getting $32 million. If Burrow and Herbert don't do deals, they're getting like $5, $6, $7 million. So I'm not so sure that they beat this deal, because to do so, they're already at a disadvantage of $25, $26 million. Their platform number is much lower, and they have 2 years left, not one, because they have the fourth year, they have the fifth-year option, and, of course, potential franchise tags. So I think they're going to sway towards Hurts, although bigger than Hurts, but I think less than Jackson.
Wow, that would be...
I do.
That would be super, super interesting. It's Doug Gottlieb Show here on Fox Sports Radio. Andrew Brandt, former Packers executive, of course, host of the Business Sports Podcast. He writes a column for SI.com, and he has his Sunday 6 newsletter. Aaron Rodgers is now man about town. Right, Knicks games, Ranger games, OTAs, no problem. You famously signed that contract originally, his rookie contract with Aaron Rodgers. How long does the honeymoon phase last?
It's interesting to me that there's a lot of praise going on for doing what most players do, show up for workouts. Now, I know he didn't do it in Green Bay the last couple of years, and neither did Brett his last few years. I get it. But yeah, I mean, I think he told McAfee, I'm going to be there maybe half, and now it's a lot of attention because it's early, but we'll see. I mean, I think there's just a lot of buzz about having him there. But one thing, I have a little pet peeve, Doug, and I'll share with you, this idea that the New York media is so harsh. And, listen, Green Bay is this little town. I know everyone sort of looks at it as this little podunk in Wisconsin. But first of all, we had reporters, TV, radio, newspaper from like 6 markets, right? We had Madison, we had Milwaukee, we had Green Bay, we had upper Wisconsin, we had lower Wisconsin, we had Iron Mountain, and I'm wondering about this New York media. How harsh has New York media been to the Jets for busting on the number 2 overall pick in the draft 2 years ago? I haven't seen a lot of shade thrown at the Jets. I just haven't. So I just don't understand this harsh New York media with this whole thing.
No, I don't really as well. I think it's a little bit overplayed. Although, I mean, like, look, the Zach Wilson thing was a mess. It was a train wreck, right? And part of it is the Jets. I think the Jets thing, a good portion of it is there are several people, Mike Greenberg, for example, powerful people in sports media who are Jets fans. And so when the Jets do anything, it gets received with a lot greater praise than normal. Right? There's Jets fans. I truly believe that. And if you go and track it, like, Jason McIntyre's on the Herd, Jason Smith overnight here, like, there are Jets fans, Syracuse Mafia Jets fans that are around in the media. And I think that's one of the reasons that team is discussed way more than their actual franchise should be.
Yeah, I mean, again, I bring up the number 2 overall pick. The miss on Wilson is, they're saving it now, but it's a franchise killer. Imagine missing on Trevor Lawrence, which is only 1 pick away. I mean, imagine missing on Justin Fields, missing on Justin Herbert, missing on Joe Burrow. I mean, it's a colossal miss, and they've given up basically.
They missed on 2 in a row, obviously, but like your point, Joe Douglas missed on this one, right? This is his pick that he missed on. It's a great point, and it wasn't just that he wasn't good enough. It's that the team, his own teammates, wore T-shirts supporting the backup. Like, I've never seen anything like it. An abject disaster.
The other point is, of course, what I've talked to you about over the last 6 weeks, which is I think the Packers used their leverage well. And I said from the beginning they had the leverage. People said no, the Jets, which I still don't understand how the Jets could have had any leverage here. And they used it well. And I said this, they got a number 1 next year. It's going to be number 1. 65% is nothing. And a number 2 this year, switch picks in the first. And this is the important point. For a player that was never, ever, ever going to play for the team that traded him. I mean, that is a massive win. And $60 million off their books. So and $60 million cash. Now they reworked his deal on his way out the door to lessen the cap hit against them. Did that mean they had to come up with $14 million in their own cash? I don't know how they work. I still haven't seen that, but he was due $60 million. I don't think he gave up $60 million. I think he moved cap around. I mean, why would Aaron give up any money and rather than just move cap around? I think that's just what he did.
And then you factor in, like, I don't know if Jordan Love can play. Nobody knows if Jordan Love can play, but if he can play, they got him at $8 million basically the next 2 years.
Yeah, well, they gave him 13 basically. Another 7 combined with the 2 this year, and another 5.5 next year. So that's an interesting deal. I wonder if there's going to be some precedent now. I mean, he protected his downside risk. He did, being Love. So he's going to make $13.5 million the next 2 years. He could have made $24 million if they exercised the option, but then he risked $20 million if they didn't exercise the option.
Sure.
So he protected himself.
And they potentially have 2 first-round picks. If he doesn't work, if he's not good enough this year, they can draft a quarterback next year, and he's making high-end backup money next year. I mean, it's actually they're in a pretty good place. Obviously, you don't want to trade away, but Aaron, like you said, Aaron wasn't going to play for them anymore. That thing was over, so it doesn't actually matter.
Yeah, I mean, this is exactly. I've talked about this ad infinitum. It was deja vu from 15 years ago. You know, Brett was never going to play for them again. and we made a trade with the Jets, of course, but it was much different. It was in training camp. But, they drafted his replacement 3 years ago, and it took 3 years, but they're moving on.
Andrew Brandt, former Packers executive. Check out the Sunday 7 newsletter. He writes that column for Sports Illustrated. I encourage you to follow him on social media where you can get the Business of Sports podcast as well. Andrew, thanks so much for joining us.
Thanks, Doug.